Good afternoon. My name is Nick Colangelo. I'm a emeritus professor at the University of Iowa and also the emeritus dean. And I was the director of the Bell and Blank Center for Gifted Education at the University of Iowa. It's wonderful to feel welcomed here. Everybody's been wonderful, and I hope that my session will be very helpful to you. I'm going to be talking about acceleration today. It's one of the areas that I've done considerable research over the last many years, and there's a tremendous amount of misunderstanding about acceleration. And so I hope through the research that I'm going to share with you, through my comments, that you will have a much better idea about the reality of it. Now, as I look at the title, I realize that the word trumps may have a different meaning these days than before, okay? This has nothing to do with that silly president, okay? What trumps means is that it's something better, okay, in English language. And for so many years, not just in acceleration, one of the problems that we have with education is that many times we do what we believe is right rather than what the evidence tells us. And this is important because education is a very complicated situation, okay? And how do you help kids grow and so forth? And so whether you're a teacher, whether you're an administrator, whether you're a parent, when you have strong beliefs, sometimes even the evidence isn't going to change your mind, okay? So I want to, and there are many areas of education we don't have very much evidence. There's very little research, or the research is contradictory. And so what we do have does not help to clarify the situation, okay? The good news today is that acceleration is not one of those vague areas. We know a lot, and I will show you what it's about. So we should start off, one of the best ways to teach is to ask questions and then see where people to go with. So since we're going to talk about academic acceleration, let's make sure we are in agreement with what it is. Okay, now, many people who know me think that all I care about is acceleration. Okay, that's not true. In fact, you need to know a little bit about my background. Okay, I am a counselor. I got my master's degree in counseling. I was a teacher before that. And then I got my doctorate in counseling. And one of the issues in gifted education is that many times people believe that giftedness is all about a talent that happens to be in a young child. My belief is the important thing is the young child who happens to have a talent. And I never lose sight of that the girl or the boy is much more important than a talent. But they have a lot of interactions. So what do we mean by academic acceleration? When we talk about acceleration, it is a school-based situation most times. We're talking about taking students through the curriculum at a faster rate than other students, okay? So it's always about a certain amount of flexibility and a certain amount of speed. What we're also talking about is sometimes when more complicated information, academic information that you normally would get, let's say, at grade 7 or grade 8, but you bring it down to somebody who's at grade 4. Okay? So there's a lot of good things that happen for gifted students. And I'm not saying acceleration is the only thing, but this is what it means. So if you're working on a project and you're all excited about it and it's great and so forth, that's known as wonderful, but it's not acceleration. So I want us to be clear about what it is. So acceleration is always moving through the curriculum faster than normal expectation or moving the curriculum down to where a student is. So why would we accelerate? Okay? If you're a third grader, stay in third grade. Okay? If you're a fourth grader, stay in fourth grade. So why would we make these differences? Why would we make these adjustments? By the way, that's a good question that you asked. Okay? So those of you that are teachers, that have experience in schools, you will know this, okay? We know by experience and also test results that in any given grade, grade 3, grade 4, do you call it grade 3 and 4, or do you say year 3 and 4? Like third grade, fourth grade? Yeah? Okay. No? Okay, well, third grade, fourth grade. What you know is that in any given grade, if we take birthdays, chronological age, not everybody has a birthday on the same day, all right? So typically in the classroom, if you take a look, and we've done this, you take a look at the birthdays of the boys and girls in the classroom, there's almost a 1-year separation, almost 365 days in a typical classroom. So some people have a birthday in November, some people will have it in July, but it's usually within 1 year. Okay, that's a decent variation. But when it comes to ability, when it comes to mental ability, the typical grade can have as much as 8 or 9 years of variation, because you will have some students that are mentally ready to do 10th grade work, 11th grade work, even though they're in 4th grade. Other students are struggling. They're barely doing 4th grade work. Now, that's a very different challenge for a teacher because you have this tremendous capacity, okay? And the question you have to ask yourself as educators, what do we do with that, okay? How do we help meet that? And that's what I'm going to be addressing. The other thing I want to talk to you about is, and I believe this strongly, every student has a right to learn something new every day that they go to school, okay? No student should go to school, and if mom or dad asks, hey, what'd you learn today? Learn anything new? And you say, nothing. Now, some students say that. But across America, there are many, many students who come home and have learned nothing new that they didn't already know before. And that's not good. That's not why we send our kids to school, okay? And the reason that can happen is because of that big fluctuation that I was telling you, that if somebody's ready to do 10th grade work, but they're in 4th grade, the odds are you may not get something that's close to what that person is ready to learn, okay? And this is what is important to keep in mind. So one of the reasons that I advocate for acceleration is that through acceleration, you give every student an opportunity to learn something new every day. You just make it a better situation, okay? And what we know is that if students learn new things, if they get excited, this morning talking a little bit about flow and so forth, they will develop their talents more. It is very rare that people develop their talents when they feel bored, when they feel disinterested, okay? So you want them engaged. The other thing is that acceleration helps to minimize underachievement, okay? So let me give you an example. I hope you can follow this. Say today, I give you my talk, okay? You understand, you get it, and so forth. Now, what if you were to come back another 185 days to learn what you learned in the first hour and a half? Okay? What would happen to you? Well, I'm a counselor. I can see your faces. Some of you would get very, very bored. Think about day 70, what it would be like for you in this room. Some of you get very, very... Others of you would start misbehaving because you'd be so bored. This is so contrary to what I'm ready for that you would not be sitting there the way you're sitting now. Okay? And this is a little bit of the truth of what happens to gifted students in typical classrooms. They learn the material, figure out quickly, and then the pace is so disconnected with what they're ready for that they're either going to be bored or sometimes they begin to act out. And because I'm a trained counselor, by looking at you, I think I know the 5 or 6 of you that would act out, okay? But this is something important for you to keep in mind because for you, this is just an exercise. For other students, this is the reality of what school can be like. Let me go back to the... Let me go back to the acceleration. You've all taken a driver's test, you know, when you... In the United States, especially if you live where it's cold, one of the questions on a driver's test is, what do you do when you're driving in the winter, you hit ice, and the car begins to skid, all right? Well, the first thing you do is you scream, okay? Then if you're Catholic, you cross yourself, okay? But the answer to what you do is you take the car and you turn towards the way you're skidding. And the reason is because you're trying to straighten your car out, because if your car is straight, you have a better chance of controlling it. However, what happens with most people when they start skidding this way is they turn the other way and spin the car, because to turn towards the skid is not intuitive. It doesn't make sense, okay? So just like turning towards the skid doesn't make sense, what we have found in our research is that when bright students, gifted students, are put into a much more challenging situation, it's not that they don't do as well because the work is harder. They actually do better because the other students have a different attitude, but they're challenged. They want to learn this material. And so the belief that if you put a gifted student in a very easy classroom, they will get all good grades, that's not true. In fact, their grades actually are pretty poor. And this is very counterintuitive. Okay. So how do you accelerate students? We know what it is. We know to some extent why you do it. How can you do this? Okay. There's 2 basic umbrella types of acceleration. Okay? One is called content-based. And in content-based, what it says is the student stays in the grade, but the material comes here. So in content-based, if you are a girl in the 4th grade and you're very good in math, okay, you can take math with the 5th graders, but then you come back to 4th grade for the rest of the day, okay? And this is used in the United States quite a bit because how many teachers can always, you know, stop everything that they're doing but teach a higher math? So again, take math because math is the one subject that most acceleration happens. You have a boy very good in math in grade 5, very good. Can go to grade 8 for one class of math and then come back to grade 5, okay? That's acceleration. The reason is because that boy is taking something that normally would not be there at grade 5. So examples of content-based. Single subject acceleration, that's what I just told you about math. That means one subject, because one of the things we know about gifted students, but especially about acceleration, you don't have to be good in everything. You might be very, very good in math, but not necessarily in literature. So you get accelerated in math. Okay? The idea is to differentiate, to meet your needs. Okay? Another one, what we call dual enrollment, is you can be in high school, 10th grade, and be taking a college course at the same time, but you take it online, or you take it sometimes after school, but you go back to your regular school. So you're taking a college course, you're taking high school, you've accelerated in your college course, but you stay in one. I don't know if you all understand what advanced placement is. In the United States, we have a lot of advanced placement courses. They're called AP. What an AP course is, it's a course developed for first year in college. So if you take it during secondary school, grade 11, you will be taking a college course while you're in grade 11. It's a perfect example of content-based acceleration, okay? Now, if you're taking a course that we call honors, so let's say it's honors math, is that acceleration? I don't know. I would have to look at the curriculum, okay, because it doesn't meet the definition. But acceleration is if you're taking a college course, okay? And now with computers and distance learning, it's so much easier for a student in one grade online to take a course that's much higher. It makes life easy. But the very nice part of this for a lot of parents, for a lot of teachers, is that if you're 15 years old, you stay with your group, but you're still getting some courses, okay? So that's, and this is probably the acceleration that is most used. And by far, math is the #1 area that people take a single subject. When the kids are smaller, a lot of times it's reading. The kids in 3rd grade will take reading with 4th and 5th grade, and then come back to 3rd grade. Then there's the other category, which is grade-based acceleration. In this one, the student moves out of their class, okay? It is not in step with the age. And this is the one, when people think about acceleration, this is usually the one that you think about, because what it means, we call it grade skipping, okay? So let's say you're in 4th grade, and you're really doing well. You basically know what 5th grade is all about, and so the school skips you to 6th grade, okay? Now, there's a couple of things you need to know about grade-based acceleration, okay? First of all, it's not a secret. See, it's a social event. Everybody knows if you've been grade skipped because you're not where you're supposed to be, okay? And when everybody knows, everybody will have an opinion, for better or for worse, okay? And one of the things we've learned when we've developed a scale for who's ready to be accelerated is that the most difficult part of grade skipping is not the work. There are a lot of kids who can do the work. It's the social, emotional adjustment for having to make that kind of a public move. And you have to take that into consideration, okay? So grade skipping is used quite a bit, and I will get to the research about grade skipping, but I hope you understand me when I say that it's really a social event, that it's really a public event, okay? So your friends know about it, your new teacher knows about it, your old teacher knows about it, your mother-in-law knows about it, your father-in-law knows about it, your neighbors know about it, and everybody will have an opinion, all right? So you understand that. The other forms of grade-based acceleration, okay, when I say whole grade, that's the grade skipping, is you can start school early, okay? How is it here? Is it usually about age 5? You start kindergarten, 4? Okay, 4. Ours, you know, it's starting at 5, so 4. So whatever your birthday is on, then you can start school, and everybody says, fine. Now, you have to realize when you're 4 years old that somebody can have a birthday almost a full year before you do, or behind you, right? And when you're 4 years old, 1 year difference is a pretty big difference. But we don't make an issue about that. We say, okay, you know, you're 4. So we have done some research. What about if you started kids a little bit before 4? Because you can do tests to see if they're ready and so forth. And actually, the research is quite good. Okay, that there are many kids who are ready to start school even though they're 3.5 or 3 3/4. Okay? But the rules say you have to be 4 because it's easier to say everybody start at 4, okay? But the research says there are some kids a little bit earlier, all right? Now, when they're this small, you don't know, is that a good thing to do? Do you want to start a year earlier or not? Okay, even though the research. So whenever parents come to me and say, well, I think my daughter is ready to start school, she's not quite 4 years old, but if they're hesitant, we just say, no problem, just wait. You know, your child is still very, very, very young. We can see it in another year or two. But what you need to know is that the studies that have been done with early entrants are actually quite positive, okay? But just because the studies are positive doesn't mean that you're going to be relaxed. And I'm more concerned about mom and dad, okay? I understand those things. The other one that is a bit easier for people to understand is early entrance to college or university. Okay, so we do this quite a bit at Bell and Blanc Center. So what this means is that you go to grade 12 here, right? So do you go to grade 12? Is that the last 18 years old? Okay, well, we call it grade 12. So let's say you're in grade 10 or grade 11. You're going to graduate in 2 more years. Okay? But you don't want to stay in high school. You'd like to start college early. Right? And so you can do that with early entrance. Now, that's just not right for everybody because you're going to be younger than the other college students and so forth. So why would we take, and we're very selective, why would we take someone 2 years before they should be going to college? Okay? And the reason we do it is just because there's a small minority of kids who really have nothing left to learn from high school. They really don't like being there. They've learned it. All their academic credentials say they've learned this, and so they're ready to move on. Now we have a choice here. Choice A is, it's nice that you're ready to move on, but that's not the way life is. So you just stay till you're age 18. Or the other choice is, well, do we have research that says, given your profile, that if you moved on early, you would be successful? We didn't have those profiles a number of years ago. We have them now, okay? So do you see what I'm saying? The difference is, just because something is possible doesn't mean you need to do it, but at least we know a lot more and we know which students with their profiles are very likely to succeed by going to college early, because we do it. And the more research we have, the more possibility. One of the saddest things for an educator like me, one of the saddest things is to hear students say, I have nothing left to learn in this school. I really am just treading water. You know what I mean by treading water? Instead of swimming, I'm just standing still in the water, and I want to move on. That's usually one of the profiles that, you know, maybe the person is ready to move on. Okay. So the biggest issue in my mind is acceleration effective? Okay? And this is the question that has always been difficult to answer, because why would you do something if it's not effective? Okay? Why would you take chances and so forth? And this is where we came out with the first major study, A Nation Deceived, okay? And then we did a 15-year follow-up, A Nation Empowered. And what we did was we put together over 50 years of research and did an analysis of it and then some of our own research to say, what do we know about acceleration in research? Okay? Do we know if it works or doesn't work? The reason we called it A Nation Deceived is because at the time that we came out with this in 2004, most of America believed that acceleration did not work. And so we say, well, you've been deceived because the last 50 to 60 years of research tell a different story, okay? But when something does not fit what you believe, you don't want to hear it, okay? So let me give you a personal example, okay? One of my big fears is needles, okay? I don't like them. I didn't like it when I was little. I don't like them at my age now, okay? And I will do anything to avoid going. So a couple of years ago, I was at the doctor because I had to get my shots to go to a part of the world that needed quite a few shots. And I'm thinking, why am I doing this, okay? But I had to do that. And so the doctor, who's a woman, she is explaining to me that, you know, when I get this, there may be some side effects, don't do anything strenuous, yeah. I was really not listening because I knew that in about 4 minutes, she was going to give me some shots, and that's all that mattered to me. And so out of all this blah, 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 then she says something that made me just perk up. She said, and just so you know, that there is a 4% chance that given who you are, that this won't work. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm going through all this, and there's a 4% chance it may not work? I said, look, I'll see you when you're at 100%, okay? I don't want, for you, if you're not afraid of needles and so forth, a 4% chance that it might not work means nothing. For me, it means a lot, okay? And this is the way research is with everybody. If you are positive about acceleration, you don't need a lot of evidence. But if you're negative, you are going to need a lot of evidence to convince you otherwise, okay? So just keep that in mind. And I understand that, and I appreciate it. When this study came out about acceleration, we got a lot of interest around the world, but especially in the United States. We got a main feature in Time magazine. We were interviewed in all the major newspapers, so forth. We had almost 5 million hits on the Nation Deceived website. So suddenly there was a lot of interest. People wanted to know more about really what's going on with acceleration. And one of the good things about this study is that it brought something from the back room to the front room. And what this study did was, in addition to our own research, we synthesized the past 50 years of research on everything we could find on acceleration, okay? And what came out is that it was very consistent. Study after study after study said that acceleration was positive, that it really helped students, okay? However, there was still a disconnect between what the research said and what people were comfortable of doing. We had it translated to a number of languages. We received the grant so that people could read it in their own language. Got a lot of attention. And we looked at research evidence, we looked at clinical evidence, teachers, psychologists that work with students, And we also listened to personal stories of students who had been accelerated. So it wasn't just studies, it was more than that. So what did we find in Nation Deceived and Nation Empowered? Okay. First of all, and right now when I say academic, I'm talking about school subjects. I'm not talking about physical education. I'm not talking about the arts or anything it might apply. I'm talking about math, science, literature, the academics. Okay. So what we found is that in the short term, does it help a student to be accelerated like the following year, the year after? The answer is yes. It has a very nice short-term acceleration. Okay? The trouble is, as those of you that are parents, you're going to say, well, this may be nice for a year or two, but what about 6 years down the road? Are we going to regret? Okay? It's like marriage. Everybody likes marriage the first 3 months. Okay? But how will it be years down the road, okay, before you can say, well, this is successful? And that's the issue with, and that's a very good question to always ask is, will it be a positive further down? Those are not easy questions to answer because how do you know? Okay, so many things happen. So for instance, if you get accelerated and then 10 years later, you're unhappy in school, or 15 years later, you're unhappy with your job, do we go back and say it was because you were accelerated? See, so many other things have happened. So it's not an easy question to answer. However, we found ways that we might be able to provide some answers. In the long-term effects, there have been a number of studies where what they did was they took a student who had been accelerated in school and they followed when they were in college and then also in their work life, okay? And then sort of backtracked and said, did they seem to be successful? Did they do well in college and so forth? And what they find in study after study is that when you follow them that way, it seems that those who've been accelerated do quite well in life. Not 100%, yes?
Wasn't there a difference between accelerating 1 year or 2 years or 3 years?
Yes. The answer is yes. I don't know if everybody could hear. She said, is there a sequence between accelerating just 1 year, 2 years, and not? And actually, what you're talking about is radical acceleration. Okay? If you get accelerated at least 3 years, that's known as radical. Okay? And what we have found, there isn't as much research on this because we don't do it that often, but what we have found is that those who are radically accelerated also have very, very positive long-term results. Okay? So the long-term results have been really quite good all the way down the line. Okay? Now, what does that mean for your son or daughter in 3rd grade? If I tell you the long-term results, are you still willing to do it? You know, it's still a decision to make. But where we have not told you the truth, where we have not always been open and honest with you, is to at least let you know, look, we know a lot about acceleration. Whether you want to do it or not is a different story. But this is what's likely to happen. Okay? And you deserve to know that. You should know it as parents. You should know it as teachers. It's always a complex decision. We had some major work in our major Nation Empowered study about after school. Okay, when students graduate and they get into their career, again, those who had been accelerated at least once seem to be doing better in their careers. That doesn't mean 100%, but statistically, most of them have really done quite well. Okay? And doing well in your career, it's not bad. Okay? It's not everything in life, but it's really not too bad. So this is the one, though, that stops everybody. You say, okay, you might do better academically, you might do better in your career, but what about the social emotional? Okay? And this is the most important question that people ask. And again, as someone who is trained in counselor education, this is the important question that I ask. Okay? Because even if you do better academically, but it's at the cost of your social adjustment, you really need to think about that. Okay? Now, it is easier to measure how much you have gained in mathematics. There are tests that can say, did you learn all of this material in mathematics? And we can measure that pretty well and say yes. We can also measure, are you very good at scientific thinking? We can measure that. Okay? It is a much more complicated measure to say, are you happy? Because that has so many other variables into it. Okay? An attitude about school. So here's what we have, and some of you have probably heard about Karen Rogers, and this is a synthesis of studies, but almost all the studies that we have in social emotional are also positive. And that one usually surprises people. Okay? Now, they're not quite as positive as the academic because it's much more difficult to measure some of these things. But when you take happiness measures, you take measures about feeling good about being in school and attitude, the social effects of acceleration tend to be quite positive. But here's something I'm going to share with you, and this is very, very important. Okay? Just because you accelerate your child doesn't mean she's going to be happy. Okay? It means she will probably do better in school. Whether she's happy or not ends up having some other issues with it. Okay? But what we do know is if any boy or girl is closer to their academic readiness, they also tend to be happier. And that's what we've been finding. So the more challenged you are, the more close you are to your level, the happier. Most people who are bored are not happy. Okay? So that's what's going on. So the social effects are positive, but not quite as positive as the academic effects. So here's the paradox of acceleration. Here I've been telling you all this good news, okay? But then the other part of it is, at least in America, my guess is probably here, many, many people still don't believe it. They still, so what? Okay? And this is the great paradox in our country. I have nothing else to share with you that is so consistently positive in the research. Not about reading, not about anything else that I can share with you. This is by far the most. And yet, even with that, it politically still leaves a lot of room for discussion. Do you follow what I'm saying? There's nothing else in education that I can give you that is this consistently positive in terms of research. So what is the paradox? Why? And this started off from the 60s. The research community has known that acceleration has positive results, but it doesn't come out to the general public. It doesn't come out to schools. It doesn't come out to society in general. It's getting better now because of our reports, but it still hasn't won. In fact, if I say to you something like, well, how about enrichment categories for gifted? Most of you would say, yeah, no problem. Why not? Okay? Unless you're against gifted. Because enrichment, even though they work well, enrichment doesn't strike a certain hesitation in us. Okay? But acceleration does. So why is there disconnect between the research and practice? Okay. One is academic. I've only taken some of these. The belief is that if you learn something pretty quick, fast, you will forget it later on because you don't really know it. It seems like you know it. but you don't know it profoundly because it takes a certain amount of time to learn it, okay? Not a bad thing to know. You know, do students who learn math or science seem to get it for a year or two, and then as time goes on, they've lost that information? Everything that we've been able to study says no, that what you learn, you continue. Okay? So that's not bad. If you really learn the thing, you maintain it. But that is a big fear that people have, is that you will learn it. It's, you know, some people say, well, if you study hard for the test, you pass the test, but then you forget everything, okay? This isn't the same thing. If you accelerate it, you maintain the academic, okay? Then there's the social emotional. I've been telling you, this is still probably the biggest one. People feel like if you're 12 years old, you should be with other 12-year-olds. If you're 13, you be 13. Otherwise, something's going to go wrong, okay? I understand that. It's just not true, okay? That your mental age is more important than your chronological age. See, this only works in school. If we didn't have schools, you wouldn't have to worry about acceleration because students just... So if you have curriculum that goes up and down, acceleration doesn't mean much. But as long as you have grades, acceleration means something. Developmental readiness. There's the belief that developmentally, kids cannot maintain abstract notions. They can't learn something really difficult because they're too young. Again, doesn't sound too bad, it's just not true. Okay? That there are kids very, very young that seem to be able to learn some pretty amazing thing. You have to know who they are, you have to have the profiles, but they're ready. Again, we didn't always know that, we know that now. And then the last one is political. Okay? And by political, I mean that there are people who put a lot of emphasis about schools who say, I don't care that this student can do this work. My political philosophy is you should not differentiate ever. Okay? They're the same people that are against gifted education because they say there's no such thing as gifted. Because if you identify someone as gifted, then you make somebody else feel bad. And this is a hard one because all the research in the world is not going to change this. This is a political point of view. Okay? And some people tremendously fight the idea that there should ever be any differentiation. We are all the same. Okay? They do not believe in differentiated ability. And if you don't believe in differentiated ability, quite honestly, it doesn't matter what I have to tell you. Okay? But if you believe that students can be equally of value, they can be equally important, but still have different abilities, then at least we have some common ground. And the issue is, should we try to meet those different abilities? How do you make decisions about acceleration? So let's say you think like, okay, they're pretty convincing, we have that. How do we do it? How do we know that somebody is ready for acceleration or not? And again, for a lot of years, all we had was teachers' feelings. It's like, well, I think she's ready, and then we have much more objective measures to do. And the good news is they're almost all free. If you go to the website at the Bell and Blank Center at Acceleration Institute, we have ways to determine if your son or daughter is ready to be accelerated in math or science or grade skipped. That was an instrument that took us 10 years to develop. Are you ready to be grade skipped? And it takes you through all the different things, both social, emotional, and academic. Yeah. There's a few places on that instrument where if this is true, then you stop. Even if the student is really bright, if you get a 0 on this scale, you just stop it, okay? So one thing is if the student doesn't want to be accelerated. We always said if the student doesn't want to be accelerated, stop right there, okay? Work out something else to do, because if the student is against, see, the purpose of acceleration is not to punish a student, it's to give a student greater opportunities. So if for whatever reason they don't want to do it, okay? The other is, and I don't know how well this fits here in this country, but in America, every mom and dad who's pretty tall thinks that their son is going to be a professional basketball player, okay, or a football player. And so they see big-time money, Nike endorsements and all this, okay? If you are hoping that your son or daughter is going to make it athletically, usually acceleration is not a smart thing, because the more you're in school, you get to play with your age mates. Maybe something like gymnastics, but otherwise, it doesn't help you. And whenever we've talked to parents and the father says, I know my son is going to play professional football, acceleration won't help, because to have another year in school helps, okay? But other than that, most other things are negotiable. But this is an excellent place for resources, so that you never have to make a decision that you can't defend or that you don't understand. And that wasn't always true. This is all fairly recent, the last 10 years. And so what is empowerment? Our new report, what empowerment is all about is courage. It's the courage to act on evidence rather on behalf of our students. There's evidence out there we didn't have before. And it takes courage to act on that, especially if it wasn't what you used to believe. We know a lot more than we used to know. I want to thank you